Hi, everybody. I'm Traven Rice, and this is the Lowdown Culture Cast, and we're talking to downtown culture changers of all different types. We're here at P&T Knitwear on Orchard Street, and I'm really excited today to be talking with artist Laura Nova. Hi, Laura.
Hi, everybody.
Laura Nova is an artist, educator, and activist who lives and works on New York's Lower East Side, creating festive, absurdist spectacles that unite generations and diverse communities. The first public artist in residence to be embedded in New York City's Department for the Aging, Nova brings expertise and empathy to her projects and actions, designing each element to enhance social wellness and decrease social isolation. Working in festivals, public monuments, and the city street, Nova delivers spiels to homebound New Yorkers, organizes an older adult cheerleading squad, and designs crafting kits, guides, and costumes that help nurture emerging activists of all ages. She's currently designing and teaching in the CareLab at the New School and is an Urban Field Station Collaborative Arts Fellow, advocating for the care and longevity of humans and trees. Nova's work has been featured at the New Museum, the Museum at Eldridge, the Brooklyn Museum, the Metropolitan Museum of Art, Real Artways, and many galleries, including the Hole in New York City, the Substation Gallery in Johannesburg, South Africa, and National Art Center in Tokyo, Japan. So I'm excited to talk to you. And I want to just say that we've known you for quite a while through the Lowdown. And the way that we first met, I believe, was through Feed Me a Story.
Yes. I believe Teresa Leung and I were producing a cooking show at the senior center that was part of the apartment housing project, Cherry Street.
Mm-hmm. And then that went on to you did some stuff at Essex Market with that.
Oh, yes. That's a really long, 13-year collaboration. We've not only the Essex Market, but Governor's Island, Ellis Island, the Met.
That you've kind of toured with it.
Yes.
Can you describe what that project is?
A lot of foodways and talking about stories, immigration stories, the stories behind food. And, of course, because the Lower East Side was and still is in many ways like a center of migration and immigration. There's a lot of stories to be told, not just about family recipes, but our gut biome, all of these things relating to food. And so, of course, the Essex Market was a centerpiece of some of our projects.
Yeah, it seems to me like your work is always very interactive, but also multi-generational, almost always, and often multicultural. Is this always intentional?
Well, I mean, first, it started because we got this residency at the senior center. So we were working with an elder population. And then, of course, the Lower East Side is considered a naturally occurring retirement community, or NORC for short. And so being part of this community also means that you're around a lot of older people. And then, of course, it's the home to a lot of Chinese, Puerto Rican, Jewish, and hipsters. And we're all living here together, and we're all different ages and coming from different places. And, food is one of those ways that you can connect and gather people from all those different backgrounds.
Yeah. Yes. And then separately, and there's different projects I know that we've sort of covered on and off and seen. There was another one called Moving Stories.
This really came out of my own interest in movement. I'm a long distance runner and have been active in several running communities. When I first moved to the city, I joined the Leukemia Lymphoma Society's team in training. which raises money to fight cancer, and ran and raised money, many marathons and triathlons, and became a mentor and got involved in the Achilles Track Club, which is a running group for disabled athletes. And when I was thinking about my own neighborhood, a running group with some of my older neighbors might not have been like, a real sell. So I decided let's do a walking group. And Moving Stories grew out of this walking group, which told stories as we, everyone in the walking group would lead a walk each week, and we would go to a place that was important to them, and they'd tell the story behind it. It also came out of when you live on the Lower East Side, you see a lot of tour groups come through, especially on Grand Street. They're pointing to all the places, the food places, but also the buildings, and giving their, architectural history and talking about, the labor unions and the spura and the pulling down of all the tenements to make way for the new developments. I always walk by these tour groups and think, who are these tour operators? They don't live here. And I thought, my neighbors are going to be the experts. They're the ones who can give you a real tour. And so that's how it started, because I started asking my neighbors to take me on a walk and let me see the important places.
So you mentioned that the idea of a NORC, but most people don't know what that is. Can you describe what that is? And the NORC is, it's in certain apartment sort of complexes, right? It's designated areas where people live.
Well, I mean, it's also the NORC of the Lower East Side, wherever the demographic lines are drawn for the Lower East Side, they, from the census, they attribute, almost 25% of this neighborhood as being over the age of 65. There's also, needs, social services that your community receives from the Department for Aging. So there's actual NORC office, and they help distribute social services. And apartment buildings here on the Lower East Side, some of them do, provide some of that and redistribute that funding. Seward Park, there is the NORC office. It happens to be in the Apple Bank, which is owned by the Seward Park Co-op. So there's a lot of NORCs around. In fact, New York City is, has a large elder community. Also, because when we age in place and we've lived somewhere for a really long time and you're still living there, you become part of your naturally occurring. It's because you're staying there, and you're not moving out to a nursing home or out of the city or whatever. So that's what naturally occurring means in the sense that you're aging and staying in place. I assume I'm going to get there myself.
Yeah. It's an unusual, actually, thing to hear.
We're all getting older, so we all have a future.
So you realized this was right where you were living, and just decided to start asking your neighbors to tell you stories.
Well, I did want to get to know my neighbors. I moved to this neighborhood, though my grandparents had emigrated here 100 years ago. I didn't grow up here, and I did want to get to know the neighborhood and the people that live here. I wanted to be part of the community, and this, I started by asking one of my neighbors. I was like, "Could you tell me a story?" And that's how it started.
That's how Moving Stories started.
That's how Moving Stories started, yeah.
And so then it ended up being sort of profile pieces of different characters, I would say.
Yes. And we told stories of, a first kiss in, at the library, or, a synagogue that became a laundromat, a woman who lived in an apartment when she moved there 50 years ago and revisited it during, the story, telling of the story. And a science teacher. There was stories from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and they were all in this walking group together. And we gave tours once we had kind of profiled all their personal stories and walked to all these places and made maps and produced all this ephemera connected to our tour. Then we ended up doing it live, not just at the New Museum had a festival back then. It was Idea City, and the theme that year was invisible. So of course, elders are often invisible and unheard, so that was a good fit. So we gave tours during that festival, and we also partnered with the Moth, and we called it Homecoming, and everybody performed live, without notes, as the Moth does, and we did that as part of a storytelling night at the Manny Cantor Center.
And so how did you feel, what was their response, once you were engaged with them? And then, as you said, I think if they're feeling invisible, or our culture doesn't really hold up our elders or really pay attention to them.
Well, it was interesting. One of the tour guides in Moving Stories said, when she came to this neighborhood, they changed it, and now it's your turn, looking to me as a younger, generation, I've moved here, and, it's now my turn to shape, what this neighborhood becomes. And, the understanding of, change isn't necessarily bad, but telling stories, it's not just to preserve the past, but also to give us tools for the future too. And I think being part of these storytelling events, they were intergenerational. The stories were shared with, a wide, population. Not just the people who live here attended, but of course, the New Museum's festival brought people from all over. So I think there was a really an embrace of their stories and their voices, and a lot of joy and humor too. I mean, some of the stories can be bittersweet, but I think when we connect in this way, it's important to, and I think most of my work has joy in it and brings people together to celebrate. And I think we achieved that with Moving Stories.
And it's usually live, the work, quite often.
Yeah, there's always performance. There's always movement.
And
yeah,
it's always, my sense is that it's always bringing different people together to create something together.
Yes.
So that's the interactive part. And like you said, it's not something, you told me once, it's not something you can buy or hang on a wall. It's not a painting.
Yeah. That is problematic, of course, because I do have to eat also. But I've applied for a lot of grants and gotten commissions to produce this work. When we make stuff as part of the collaboration, a lot of with Moving Stories, there were a lot of images. We made maps and photographs, which we did print and frame. But we didn't charge people to, go on our tours.
Yeah. I know the next projects you've been working on are more based around the environment And community and trees. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, our relationship to trees, my interest, of course, came from working with well-being and longevity. And so I thought there were a lot of parallels with the longevity of humans and the longevity of trees. Both need socialization. They need a sense of purpose. Of course, trees have a lot of purpose in our city. They're very hardworking. They provide shade. They help with, flooding and sewage, and they give us some cooling. They need to be taken care of too, and they need some socialization as well. And and a lot of that, is similar to older adults who need to also be cared for, but also need to be socialized, also need to be have a feeling of purpose. And so I thought there was a way that I could look into some of these similarities and think of ways to engage us to take care of our city, trees.
Mm-hmm. I mean, all of this work is very communal and interactive and live often. Most of those elements are live and performed, right? They're events. So if somebody asks you, who doesn't know a lot about the art world, what type of art do you make? What do you say?
I usually start by saying I'm a public artist, and I make public art that, is socially engaged. But often it's just easier to just talk about like the current project that I'm working on. So, right now I'm working on an interspecies wedding ceremony. And, there's a lot of art that needs to be, that's part of that. So, of course, there's the ceremony itself and the ritual. So there's going to be music and dance and poetry and, because you got to say the vows and everything. But there's also the element of the sculpture. We need a really big ring to get married to the tree to fit around the base of the tree, and then designing a tree for the human as well. So there are performative sculpture is involved. So I am multidisciplinary in that the work is, it will require music and dance and performance and social sculpture, and often, you got to document all this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Who doesn't want to have wedding pictures? So we're going to need photography and video and, all of that. So that is the type of work I make.
So the whole intention is for it to be public.
Yes. These are public projects that allow for people to connect and gather in public space, shared public space. And this is, the idea of also listening and connecting to people from various backgrounds, a safe place, to do that. Mm-hmm. And also with a lot of joy and fun as well. I mean, climate change can be so depressing, but, if you're invited to a wedding, it makes it a lot more, manageable to deal with the stewardship of the environment.
Yeah. And would you say when you were younger and you're thinking about being an artist that you envisioned this type of work happening?
I always was a maker, drawing and a lot of sculpture. And architecture. I was really I've always been interested in public space and making interventions, let's call it. And I think that I was always interested in participation, and also, I have a sense of humor. So there's always been a sense of joy and humor in the work. So. I don't know if I knew that I would be making this type of work, but there was always, on a smaller scale, I always made participatory, humorous, joyful kind of things.
Mm-hmm. And then I think you mentioned social change. Is that an intention that comes with sort of an overall vision of, say, a public art project? Are you thinking about social change? Is it an awareness? What is that sort of element?
I think anytime you make something, an intervention of sorts, and you put it in public space, it's not like a forced change. It's just a perspective. And the content, when you're dealing with people and the environment and health and wellness, like you're shifting people's perspective. I guess that's, fundamentally, I'm not forcing change. I'm just creating the environment for it, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I would say that spotlighting these different seniors from different backgrounds and having their stories shown. And wasn't there a cheerleading team?
Yes, the Silver Sirens. And they began because of a conflict with younger basketball players, and they were fighting over the use of a public basketball court. And the older members of the community wanted to use the basketball court for their Zumba, and the younger folks were wanting to play basketball. So we brought these two generations together, and we did like a fitness exchange, teaching Zumba and basketball to each other, and then out of that grew like relationships and connection and this idea to cheer for each other. And so we even taught each other cheerleading, and then that's how the group emerged. But then after working with that design problem, I guess, we ended up cheering about other things like healthcare, age discrimination, vote, encouraging people to vote.
Yeah. I mean, to me, shared space in the public, we live in the New York City bubble, so we're used to sharing space because there's so many of us here. But I think around the country, that's becoming more and more unusual.
Well, I mean, I think we have a problem of sharing space here in New York City too. That's why, I mean, the cheerleaders were not the only project that started from a conflict. The Kung Fu master was teaching Kung Fu at Madison, the little flower park on Madison Street, and there was a conflict over the site. Another group wanted to use that same site to do meditation, and so they had a conflict over the teaching their practices and negotiating who gets to use things when, and being able to listen to each other and really have not a shouting match, is an important tool for anyone, anywhere, not just New York City, but of course it happens here.
Yeah. But so how do you find out about the conflicts and then decide who's going to be your subjects?
I don't decide. I am invited. I would never just impose my, ideas onto people. So the communities, either I'm a part of them or I'm invited in. But that's where the work isn't just, I'm a coach, a facilitator. I'm not, and we collaborate together because you don't. I can't tell other people's stories. I give a framework, a little art direction, but the stories, the voices are those belong to the people who are in the community that I'm working with.
So, where will we see the next project, the current project in process?
The interspecies wedding ceremony. Well, I'm in what we call the research and development phase. I'm pitching it to a lot of places. So I can't give you a place where it's going to be yet. Okay. So, but it is. I'm raising money and producing the elements for the project. I did sort of an experimental version of it. We didn't marry the trees, but we did, as part of the Art in Odd Places Festival this past fall, I collaborated with a bunch of people from the CareLab at the new school, including Sarah Kohler and Michelle Kahane. And we produced a project called Tree Loving Care, where we performed on 14th Street, taking care of the trees, kind of reciting poetry and tying our poems around the tree, and also just embodying and moving like a tree, as well as picking up garbage, because that's one of the ways that we take care of our city trees. And that project and the documentation of it you can see on my website.
Oh, great. Okay. Thank you very much for coming.